I think I probably need to eat less salt. Oh wait, nope, that's my Pulse. The Sapphire Pulse 5700 XT, that is. This is the AMD Radeon 5700 XT. This is the Sapphire Pulse. Sapphire makes a lot of pulses. This particular one is mine. I mean, not even just this model. There's also, like, this is little Navi. So the 5700 XT is out, and it's been out, and there's a million people making 5700 XTs. Well, today, 7 more people are launching the 5500 XT that you can pick up and buy. This is the card that's meant to go head-to-head with the 1650 Super from NVIDIA, or this is the card that is meant for 1080p gaming. Awesome 1080p gaming. This card, can you believe that a commodity product has 7 nanometers in it? I mean, that TSMC and their lithography and 7 nanometers for just such a tiny die, 158 millimeters square for for little Navi. 1080p, super high performance for esports gaming, reasonable 1080p gaming for everything else. That's what this card is. 7 nanometers, 6.4 billion transistors. This particular card has 4 gigabytes of VRAM. It is available with 4 or 8 gigabytes of VRAM. We're going to talk about the performance implications of that in just a second. 32 ROPs. It is GDDR6, even though it's 4 gigs, so it's here for the future. 130 watts for this card, so it takes a single 4-pin power connector, which is a little overkill. The other thing that you notice, looking at this, 8 PCI Express lanes, not 16, 8. So it's going to help them save a little bit on cost. Also, the PCB on this card is tiny. It's like super tiny. But we're going to see some super short ITX versions of this card. It's Sapphire Pulse, so you do get the overclock capabilities. All of my testing was done not in the overclock configuration, just the totally stock out-of-the-box configuration, which is 1717 megahertz GPU game clock. That's about the speed you can expect on average in most games. 1845 is the maximum boost clock. That's up to 5.20 teraflops for the peak single precision performance, or we're going to call it half precision this launch. So 10.4 teraflops, that's when you do twice as much, like it's half as many bits for each thing, but you pack in 2 bits and then do the math and then split it again when you get it out. So 5 teraflops, that's what you need to take away from that. Yeah, enough of that jibber jabbering. 8 gigs versus 4 gigs. That's the first question. Is it worth it to spend the extra money to go from 4 to 8 gigs? You gotta understand what happens when you don't have enough. If it were me, I would probably save my money and get the 4 gig card. If I were contemplating the 8 gig card, the 8 gig 5500 XT, I would be remiss if I didn't really try to get the 5700 with the 8 gig as an upgrade over the 5500 XT VRAM. When you don't have enough VRAM, you've got textures or a game or something you're playing, and it's got 4.5 gigs. The extra 500 megs, the extra half a gig of stuff has to live in main memory. So it's got to shuttle stuff from main memory to the GPU, and there is a definite performance penalty for doing that. So like, for example, Borderlands 3 DX12 Medium, that performance difference, it's 8%. 8% even on the 4 gig card. 12% if you move up to DX12 High. So medium, maybe like medium low is what you need to drop down to for like Borderlands 3. But on other games like Red Dead Redemption 2 on medium, less than a 2% difference. So between 4 and 8 gig performance. Now, you might be thinking, what's the worst case scenario between 4 and 8 gig? Well, Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Breakpoint, at very high, you shouldn't run very high with a 4 gig graphics card. I mean, come on. 20%. Although I think if you do that, you're intentionally trying to gimp your card. Why would you do that with 4 gig card? Doesn't make any sense. This is probably not news to you if you've been playing games since like GTA 5. You go in the graphics settings in GTA 5, you get the little bar. It tells you how much VRAM you're going to use for typical play configuration. And you don't want to run at or near the limit of your graphics card because you just don't. I mean, there was a graphics card a couple of years ago that had 4 gigs of memory, but it was really only 3.5. And so if you got in that no man's land between 3.5 and 4 gigs, your performance tanked. Right now, there is the RX 590, the RX 580, and the RX 590. Those cards are very long lived. They're based on Polaris. Polaris goes all the way back to the RX 480. And the 580 was a tweaked version of that with a little bit faster memory, and then the 590 was even tweaked on top of that. Still a very solid card. The problem is reducing components, reducing production cost, reducing complexity, reducing the driver complexity from having to maintain Polaris and Navi. Here's little Navi. So this is going to make things a lot better for the next couple of years in terms of like what the developers have to do to support games, because now we got the 5500 and the 5700, and presumably future games are going to be based on, or future graphics cards for games are going to be based on some variant of that architecture. If you happen to be rocking a launch day RX 480, well, the kind of performance uplift you can expect, yeah, I've got that. Shadow of the Tomb Raider DX12 High, you're going to go from 60 FPS to 80 FPS. Oh my god. Grand Theft Auto 5 on Ultra, you're going to go from like 90 FPS to 104, so you don't really need to run it on Ultra. You can get, the game engine breaks past like 140 FPS. You'll be fine with GTA 5 on like 120 FPS, and you can get there on this card with medium-ish, medium-high settings. So like actually kind of high settings, just not Ultra. Ultra's silly. If you play Monster Hunter World with an RX 480 and you're getting about 60 FPS now, you can expect about 78 to 82 FPS in Monster Hunter World now with this card. And even going from 16 PCI Express 3 lanes to 4 PCI Express 4 lanes. Now, all of our testing was done on this system. This is the ASRock Creator X570, 16 gigabytes of G.Skill memory. It's running at 3200. This is currently configured with the Ryzen 5 3600. We did our testing with the Ryzen 5 3600 and the Ryzen 9 3900X. So I really think that this card pairs well with one of the Ryzen 5 CPUs, like the 3600, maybe the 3600X if the price difference is not really a lot. This is also, because it's got 3 DisplayPort and 1 HDMI, a good sort of productivity card that can also do gaming. So if you play the occasional game like Civ 6, you're going to get more than 60 FPS in Civ 6, like 66 FPS actually, and this card will be more than enough for any kind of like work tasks that you might throw at it. So 2 days ago, the Adrenaline 2020 drivers are out. I've had a little bit longer than that to play with them. They're pretty good. They are a pretty solid improvement over the past drivers. There's actually a lot of features in the drivers that the UI is overhauled. The UI, in my opinion, is way better than the old UI in the old drivers. There are also still the helpers that will detect your games and help you make sure that your games are set up for the best possible play experience. But the 3 most important features, which are not new features for this version, but are improved in this version, are Radeon Image Sharpening, Radeon Anti-Lag, and Radeon Boost. Now, Radeon Image Sharpening, or RIS, and Radeon Anti-Lag are 2 of the features that we've looked at in the past, and they've improved. Borderlands 3 with Radeon Image Sharpening is actually, it's kind of mind-blowing. It's sort of shocking. We've also got Radeon Anti-Lag. Now, Radeon Anti-Lag is hard to measure and really connect the dots, but it can, in some scenarios, result in reduced input latency, meaning from the time you click your mouse to the time that you see something happening on your screen. And this is really around configurations where your display is not super insanely fast. For the setup for our gaming testing, we're using Pixio displays. The new Pixio 1080p monitors, like the PXC243. This is a really, really awesome monitor, and I've been sort of waiting for something like this to come out so that we can really show off the 1080p gaming options, what you can get without spending a ton of money, but still have a really pretty incredible 1080p gaming experience with displays like that are high refresh. I mean, 60 hertz, 1080p, that's getting to be old school. You can do a lot better than that. And especially if you're playing games like PUBG, I mean, you can get upwards of 90 FPS in PUBG with a card like this at 1080p, fiddling with your settings. So Radeon Boost, what it does is it will selectively render frames at a lower resolution in order to deliver a higher frame rate in times where there's a ton of action. But it does it so quickly that you don't really notice any loss of visual fidelity. So Borderlands 3, it seems to work the best in my experience. It didn't really make a lot of a difference in PUBG, like maybe 5 FPS at most in PUBG, but it was the difference between 70-ish FPS under the most adverse conditions in Borderlands 3 to about 85 FPS under those same most adverse conditions in Borderlands 3. Now, the average in Borderlands is a little higher, but worst case scenario was much better with Radeon Boost. So it's just a setting. It just selectively is like, oh, there's a lot going on. You're moving the mouse frantically. Let's lower the fidelity so we can get those frames out. And if you've got a really high refresh rate 1080p monitor, it does make a noticeable difference. By the way, this card is faster than a 1650 Super by a few percentage points to more than a few percentage points pretty much across the board. I don't have final pricing for this card, but if the pricing is comparable to or better than a 1650 Super, then this card is going to offer a better value hands down. The one possible exception to that is maybe around the NVENC encoder, because NVIDIA's encoder is really quite good. Now, the Navi H265 encoder is a monster, but the H264 encoder is still a little bit fiddly. I really think AMD ought to work with the Open Broadcaster guys or Streamlabs and just make sure that an idiot-proof out of the box, you download OBS, you click a button, and you got great quality, like completely idiot-proof setup is there. The good news is that the software does work, but you have to fiddle with it a little bit in order to get the best possible stream quality, and some of the options are a little obtuse, although this is dramatically improved from the 5700 XT launch. It just needs a little more attention, even in the Adrenaline 2020 update. It is a lot better though. Gotta give AMD credit where credit is due. Related to the streaming stuff, there's also AMD Link. AMD Link is out on Android. It's an Android app that will stream your games to your phone. The trick here is that it's going to use the H265 encoder in this card. Now, I was not 100% sure about that. That's why this video was a little bit delayed, because it's a guess on my part, but the H265 encoder here is low latency, and it is no joke. It is an incredible, like Google Stadia really wishes that their Stadia experience was as good as what AMD is doing with AMD Link. It's not for everybody, but you can play games on your phone, on your computer, from pretty much anywhere. I mean, you can do it with Steam Link too, but H265 hardware encoder, the hardware is there, and programs like OBS can use it. It's just a matter of the programmers implementing it. So I'm sure we'll see that in things other than AMD Link before too long. The bad news is, if you got an Apple device, the AMD Link is not coming to your Apple device until probably around December 23rd. Sorry. Overwatch? Overwatch at 1440p on this card, not a problem. So it was around 80 FPS in the anti-lag setup, so not bad. Krista, the pro Overwatch player, messed around with it a little bit on Overwatch, and maybe you could tell a little bit of a difference between the anti-lag on versus off. It's like Folgers crystals. Me personally, I can't wait for Big Navi. Surely Big Navi's coming. It's on the horizon. Ooh, it's a Ryzen pun. Or is it? I don't know. Overall, this is a pretty impressive card. The driver stack is going to be what makes or breaks this card over the next 6 months to a year. If people have a good time with the drivers, they're generally very solid. There's no like the display turns green until you reboot. None of the shenanigans like that. Then I think people are going to be extremely happy with their purchase, because the hardware is there. The silicon performance seems to be there. It does perform well for the testing that we've done with it. And the clever things that AMD has done in terms of cost savings really don't end up costing you, the consumer, you, the buyer, very much at all. It's a pretty good trade-off. So I feel like AMD has got some room here to do some more innovative things with Navi. And this card overall is a very impressive card for the price point, assuming the price point is in the neighborhood of the 1650 Super, even though the performance is a little better. I'm Wendell, this is level 1. This has been a quick look at the Sapphire Pulse 5500 XT, and there's about a million other versions of this card coming. I can't wait to put this thing through a whole bunch more testing and see what we come up with. Maybe do some comparisons, like who's unlocked the secret formula for the 5700 XT. I'm Wendell, this is level 1. If you want to discuss your purchase or wax poetic with other purchasers, come to the level 1 forum. I'm signing out, and I'll see you there.
I want to show the parts where he died.
Yeah, I never show those. I always win.